I always thought I was the lucky one. A stable job, a peaceful home, and a family that smiled in every photo. But then I found out my parents secretly emptied my inheritance to cover my brother's gambling debts. No apology, just a smile and, "You're successful. He needs more help." That's when I realised being the responsible child meant being the family's ATM. They thought I'd stay quiet forever. But I had one move left. I bought the house they lived in my name. And I was done being the good daughter. If you'd asked me 5 years ago what I thought about my family, I would have said we were the definition of the American dream. My parents, Margaret and Douglas, were high school sweethearts turned suburban soulmates. My older brother Brian, a bit wild, sure, but charming in a way that made everyone excuse his recklessness. And me, Madeline, the reliable one, the one who always had her homework done, who paid her way through med school, who sent birthday cards, even when no one replied. Our family photo albums tell a story so perfect it could make a Hallmark card jealous. Summers at Lake Tahoe with coordinated swimsuits. Thanksgiving dinners with turkey so golden it glowed under the chandelier. Dad always carving, Mom always smiling, Brian always stealing the show with his loud jokes and that stupid boyish grin. And me, smiling in the background, always slightly off-center. I used to think that was just coincidence. Maybe I blinked, maybe I moved. But when I looked through dozens of albums, hundreds of photos, I noticed a pattern. Brian was always in the middle. I was always slightly to the side, like a guest in my own home. Still, I brushed it off. My parents loved me. I knew they did. They came to my medical school graduation. They told their friends how proud they were. And when I bought my first house, they brought over a bottle of champagne and a photo of my kindergarten drawing, framed in gold. That had to mean something, right? But then came the call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday. I had just finished a double shift at the ER when my father called. He sounded chipper, too chipper for someone who usually kept conversations to 5-minute summaries. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, "just some quick paperwork stuff. You remember Grandpa Joe's inheritance fund?" Of course I remembered. Grandpa Joe, my dad's father, had set up equal funds for me and Brian before he passed. He was the only one in the family who ever seemed to look at me like I wasn't a placeholder for someone else's needs. "Yeah," I said, cautious. "Why?" There was a pause, a smile in his voice. "We had to move some of it, that's all. Brian's been in a rough patch. You know how things go." I stopped walking. "What do you mean, move it?" "Well," he exhaled, as if explaining something to a child. "He needed some help, just a little boost. And you've got that steady income, right? We figured you wouldn't miss it." They took it. They took the money meant for me, money meant for my future, for my children, if I ever had any, and gave it to Brian, without asking, without telling me, without even pretending to apologize. I confronted them the next weekend. I sat at the kitchen table, across from their neatly folded napkins and their ceramic salt and pepper shakers shaped like pilgrims. My mother sipped her tea. My father scrolled through his iPad. Brian wasn't there. "You moved my inheritance," I said. My mother looked up. "We needed to help Brian. That money was mine." "You're doing well, sweetheart," she said. "Brian, he's had such a hard time." My father chimed in. "He's not as strong as you." And that's when it clicked. They didn't see me as someone to love. They saw me as someone to use. The strong one, the reliable one, the one who wouldn't say no. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear down every photo from the walls, every fake smile, every forced memory. But I didn't. I nodded. I told them I understood, because that's what they expected. That's what the good daughter does. But in my mind, something cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a fine hairline fracture across the glass. Facade I'd believed in my entire life. I went home that night and looked at the framed photo they'd given me, the drawing I made at 5 years old of our family holding hands. I was in the middle, for once. I guess even at 5, I still hoped they'd see me. What would you do if everything you worked for, your sacrifices, your discipline, your endless patience, was quietly handed to someone who never earned it? Would you confront them, forgive them, walk away? I didn't do any of those things. Not yet. I waited. Because sometimes being the good daughter is exactly what gives you the power they never saw coming. After the inheritance incident, I told myself I would draw a line. I even wrote it down in my planner. No more bailing them out. But lines blur quickly when you've spent your entire life being the glue holding everyone else together. Brian called a month later. "Maddie," he said, using that soft, manipulative tone he reserved for emergencies. "I'm starting something new. A tech platform for family services. It's genius, seriously. I just need someone to co-sign the initial funding. Temporary, of course." I hesitated. "Brian," he cut me off. "Look, I've got investors lined up. It's just this one formality. Your credit is amazing. Mine's, well, you know, but this is different. This is big." My parents chimed in the next day. "Don't be so dramatic," my mother said. "Families help each other." "You know he looks up to you," my father added, "even if he doesn't say it." And there it was again, the unspoken expectation that I would be the solution, that my caution, my discipline, my quiet stability existed solely to clean up after his chaos. I signed. The company, Nexus Home Solutions, lasted 4 months. The app never launched. The developer quit. Brian never paid a single investor back, and the loan defaulted. On my name. That was the moment the shift began. Not in them, but in how they looked at me. I wasn't the good daughter anymore. I was difficult, overly sensitive. A drama queen, according to a comment my father made during Sunday dinner, loud enough for my cousin to hear. My mother tried to smooth it over with a laugh. "She's just passionate." But the message had landed. I wasn't the hero anymore. I was the liability. And then one night, curiosity got the better of me. I borrowed Brian's phone while he was in the bathroom. He'd left it on the table, screen lit up. Notifications from a group chat titled Fam Only. I opened it. Messages from my parents, my aunt, even my younger cousin, all talking about me. Madeline's being weird again. She's obsessed with control. She acts like she's better than us. And then, ATM with legs. I stared at the screen, an ATM with legs. That's all I was to them. Not a daughter, not a sister, just a walking bank account with a heartbeat. I put the phone down calmly, quietly, and excused myself to the bathroom. I stared into the mirror for a long time. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, blinking, wondering when exactly I had stopped being a person to them. And I began to wonder, had I ever been one? A few weeks later, Brian's wife kicked him out. Something about unpaid bills, emotional outbursts, and suspected infidelity. My parents acted like it was the weather, inevitable, unfortunate, but not their concern. Except it was their concern. because he had nowhere to go, and he had a 6-year-old son, Toby, who adored me. My mother called. "We've been thinking. There's this house a few streets over. It's a perfect starter home, very affordable, especially if it's in your name." I felt my chest tighten. "You want me to buy Brian a house?" "No," she said quickly. "Just help with the paperwork, legally. Just stand in for the title until things stabilise." "Why not co-sign then? Or use your name?" A pause. "We're too old to take on new loans, but your record is spotless." I should have said no, I wanted to. But then I saw Toby that weekend. He ran into my arms like I was home. He showed me a crayon drawing of the 3 of us, him, me, and Brian, under a house with a big heart on the door. "You're my real mum now," he said. "Grandma said so." My throat closed. My hands shook. But I smiled and said, "I love you too." And then I signed. I told myself I'd read the papers carefully, but in truth, I skimmed them. I trusted. I wanted to believe, just once, that this family could do something without strings. The truth came crashing down 3 months later. I received a notice from the county assessor's office, property taxes owed under my full legal name, owner of record, Madeline Harper, full irrevocable ownership, no trust, no temporary, no cosign. I didn't own the house, I owned the debt. I confronted them again. "We didn't want to stress you," my father said. "You love Toby, don't you?" my mother added. Brian shrugged. "It's not like you're broke." I walked out without saying another word. As I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, I whispered to myself, "I don't know when it happened, but they turned me into a financial hostage." And the scariest part? I let them. 3 months after I signed the house over, I got a letter from the bank. Not an email, not a phone call, a physical envelope, thick with warning. Notice of default, immediate action required. I thought it was a mistake. I had automatic payments on my mortgage. My credit was pristine. Then I saw the address, Brian's house. My heart dropped. I drove straight to the bank, thinking it had to be some clerical error. But when the banker pulled up the file, her face changed. She leaned forward, her voice careful. "Ms. Harper, the property you hold title for was used as collateral on a private loan 6 months ago. That loan is now in default." I stared at her. "Collateral? I never signed anything like that." She tapped a few keys. "Your brother did. The documents list him as authorized by you via power of attorney." I blinked. "I never gave him power of attorney." She slid a sheet across the desk. It's signed. And there it was, my name, forged in a way that made my stomach turn. I could see the difference in the slant of the letters, the pressure of the pen, but it didn't matter. Legally, it was a mess. Until proven otherwise, I was the one liable. I drove to my parents' house without calling. I walked in without knocking. They were in the kitchen, drinking tea like it was any other Thursday. "Did you know Brian used the house to get a loan?" I asked. My mother looked up calmly. "He needed help." My father didn't even look away from the television. "He's doing his best." "He forged my signature," I said. Now they looked at me. My father raised an eyebrow. "You did sign the original documents, didn't you?" "That doesn't mean—" "You're a grown woman, Madeline," he cut in. "You make your own choices." My mother's voice was soft, almost pitying. "You've always been the one who kept everything together. We thought you'd understand." It wasn't a conversation. It was a dismissal, a verdict. I turned to leave when Brian came through the door, holding Toby's backpack. He froze. You talked to the bank. I stared at him. You signed my name. He looked down. They wouldn't approve the loan otherwise. So you forged it? Silence. And then, almost too casually, he said, Dad told me to. He said you'd cover it. I felt everything stop. The noise, the light, the movement in the room. No one denied it. That moment, standing in the kitchen where my mother used to make cinnamon rolls on Sundays, I felt something inside me tear. Not like paper, but like fabric pulled too tight for too long. It didn't rip all at once. It just gave out. That was the moment I stopped being their daughter. Over the next 2 weeks, my world collapsed. My accounts were frozen due to the dispute. Creditors began calling my personal number. My credit score plummeted. The hospital put me on administrative leave until the situation clears. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I barely left my apartment. I stopped responding to texts. Friends thought I was travelling. I let them believe it. I didn't want pity. I wanted silence. I drank too much wine. I started sleeping on the couch with the TV on just so I wouldn't feel alone. And then one night I pulled out my old laptop. I opened a blank document. I wrote a single line at the top, "To whom it may concern." It was the beginning of a goodbye letter. I wrote for hours about my childhood, about Lake Tahoe, about every time I'd been the one to step up, to sacrifice, to smile through betrayal. I wrote about the moment I realised I was never going to be loved for who I was, only for what I could provide. And as I stared at the last line, I'm tired of being useful. Something in me shifted. A second voice entered the room, not a literal voice, just a thought. What if you didn't die? What if you fought back instead? I closed the laptop. I didn't delete the letter, but I didn't finish it either. Instead, I opened a new tab and I typed, "How to reclaim property from family fraud." The community centre smelled like stale coffee and disinfectant. I didn't want to be there. I almost turned around 3 times on the walk from the parking lot, but something pulled me in, the same something that had whispered to me as I wrote my goodbye letter. I wasn't ready to die. Not yet. Not until I understood why the people who raised me had turned me into their enemy. It was a support group, 12 chairs in a circle, a facilitator with soft eyes and a clipboard. Most people didn't say much. Some cried. Some didn't speak at all. I listened, and then one woman, a retired teacher named Joan, started telling her story. Her voice was quiet. My parents always favoured my brother. He could do no wrong. I paid for his college, co-signed his car loan, even took care of his daughter when he disappeared. And when I asked them why they never stood up for me, they told me I was too strong to need support. My breath caught. She kept going. They said I was difficult, that I overreacted, that I had no empathy, but the truth is I was just useful until I wasn't. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. My skin burned like she'd taken a scalpel to my spine and exposed something raw I didn't know existed. After the session, I sat in my car for an hour, staring into the night. Then I went home and started researching. Narcissistic family systems. Scapegoat versus golden child. Emotional parentification. Intergenerational trauma. It was like reading my own biography. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't the problem. I was the scapegoat. They needed me to be responsible so they didn't have to be. They needed me to be stable so they could fall apart without consequence. And when I finally broke, they called it proof that I was unbalanced. That night, I stopped being ashamed. I started being angry. I made a list, a spreadsheet, every transaction, every lie, every forged document. Every time they used my name, my credit, my career to hold up their crumbling world. And then I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a lawyer who specialised in family financial disputes. The second was to a therapist who didn't blink when I said the words emotional hostage. Within a month, my case was filed. The lawyer confirmed what I suspected: the forgery, the unauthorised use of my name, the breach of financial trust. It's messy, he said, but it's winnable, especially if we stay quiet. So I did. I didn't confront them. I didn't warn them. I smiled at family gatherings. I sent texts to my mother asking about her health. I commented on Brian's photos of Toby with heart emojis. And all the while, I built the case. I waited until the timing was perfect. My parents were planning to transfer the remaining family assets, 2 small rental properties, into a shared family trust for tax purposes. They asked if I'd be willing to sign the consolidation paperwork. I pretended to hesitate. "Are you sure this will help, Brian?" I asked. My mother smiled. "It's just a formality, sweetheart." I reviewed the document with my lawyer. Hidden in the dense legal language was a clause, one that stripped them of any future claim to the property I currently held. They didn't notice. They signed, with real signatures this time. 3 weeks later, I filed the final paperwork. The judge upheld the transfer. The court acknowledged the previous forgery and ruled that I had exclusive, uncontested ownership of the house in question. My lawyer called me at 8:14 a.m. "It's done," he said. "They're locked out legally. They can't touch a cent." I hung up, walked to my window, and watched the sun rise. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't drowning in someone else's mistakes. The next day, my parents invited me to dinner. I went, I smiled, I brought wine. My father asked if everything was all right. I said, "Better than ever." My mother complimented my dress. I thanked her. Brian asked if I could help him with a business plan. I nodded, said I'd take a look. They had no idea, and I didn't tell them. Because the best revenge is not just reclaiming your life, it's watching your oppressors thank you while they sign their own exit. I drove home that night with the windows down, the air cool against my face, and I smiled, not because I was free, but because they had finally made me into something they feared. Someone who understood the rules and knew how to play. I sold the house on a Tuesday. No fanfare, no ceremony, just wire transfers, closing documents, and a polite handshake with a real estate agent who had no idea she was facilitating an escape. The buyer didn't care about the history, the damage, the ghosts. All he saw was square footage and resale potential. I saw liberation. The profit was substantial, more than enough to erase the debts they left in my name, with enough left to start over somewhere far away. I opened a new account under a different LLC name, registered in another state, clean, untraceable, mine. Then I sent the letter. It was delivered via courier, signature required. My parents and Brian all received their copies within 24 hours. Inside was the official notice of eviction, a copy of the property judgment, and a framed photo, one from the day we celebrated signing the family trust. The final page? A printout of their own signatures, dated, time-stamped, notarized. They had signed away their rights, willingly, Legally, I didn't answer their calls. I didn't read their texts. I turned off my location, closed my social media, deleted our shared cloud album. Silence was no longer a punishment. It was protection. I imagined them sitting together, rereading the papers over and over, searching for a loophole that didn't exist. For the first time, they were the ones trying to interpret my silence. At first, they thought it was a mistake. Then came the panic. They showed up at my apartment, banged on the door, rang the buzzer until the neighbours complained. But I wasn't there. I'd already moved out. My belongings were in a storage unit 2 states away. That week, my father left 13 voicemails. The first few were angry, defensive. "You think you're above us now?" By the 7th, he was quieter. "Let's just talk." The last one simply said, "You're still our daughter." I didn't respond, because for the first time, I wasn't just reacting, I was deciding. Do you think I'm cruel? Do you think this is revenge? Or do you see yourself in me, the version of you who swallowed hurt after hurt, and still showed up for the people who never did the same? They didn't just take my money, they took my time, my trust, my safety. And now I wasn't punishing them. I was restoring what was mine. Brian disappeared shortly after. Word got around that he skipped town, left Toby with his ex-wife, and vanished with the last of his startup money. No one's seen him since. Part of me wondered if he'd circle back once the dust settled. Another part knew he was too cowardly to face a world where I wasn't his fallback. My parents crumbled. Neighbours whispered about the eviction. The church pulled their annual speaking slot. My mother quit the women's committee. My father stopped golfing. Apparently they'd tried to explain that I'd tricked them, that I'd manipulated the documents. But the signatures were theirs. The documents were public record. The community wasn't stupid. Respect turned to pity. Pity turned to silence. And then came the twist. A month later, I received a text from an unknown number, just a link, no words. It led to a private video clearly recorded on my mother's phone. She sat on their couch, face streaked with tears, voice shaking. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything, for not protecting you, for choosing comfort over truth. I wish I could go back." It almost felt real, until I saw the reflection in the glass behind her. Brian. He was sitting in the kitchen, grinning, holding up a wine glass like it was a toast. Was it mockery? Was it manipulation? Was it both? I closed the video. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even reply. I simply sat in my new apartment, quiet, clean, uncluttered, and let the silence wrap around me like armour. I had been many things in my life, a daughter, a sister, a scapegoat, an ATM, but now I was something else entirely. I was no longer trying to be loved. I was finally learning how to be free, and when I turned off the phone, I realised something I'd never dared believe before. I wasn't alone, I had myself, and that for once was enough. The headlines didn't use my name. That was intentional. Instead, they read, "The Reckoning Inside the Movement, Giving Voice to the Financially Abused." It started as a quiet blog, anonymous, raw, and oddly specific, a collection of stories from people who had been drained by those they loved most, siblings, parents, spouses, friends. My story was there, buried in the early posts. I changed the names, blurred the details, but the emotion, that was real. Others started sending messages, then stories, then requests. Within 6 months, we had volunteers, lawyers, therapists, moderators. We filed as a non-profit. The mission was simple: education, support, exposure. We helped victims gather evidence, file legal claims, rebuild their lives. We called it The Reckoning. But I never signed my name. I didn't want the spotlight. I'd lived under a microscope my whole life. Now I preferred mirrors, places where people could see themselves and choose their own reflections. The book came next, a collection of anonymous letters from survivors, some angry, some aching, all unfiltered. It became a quiet bestseller, not viral, not loud, just steady like healing. I didn't claim it. Instead, I wrote the foreword as a daughter. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about anyone who had ever sat across a table from someone who loved them conditionally and asked, "Why isn't this enough?" Then came the invitation. A university in Oregon, a visiting lecturer position. They wanted a course on ethical communication and psychological justice. At first, I hesitated. Teaching meant presence, identity. But then I remembered the silence I once lived in and how easily it could return. I accepted. I stood in front of students, wide-eyed, eager, unscarred, and taught them how language can manipulate, how silence can wound, how justice isn't always legal. One day, a student lingered after class. She had kind eyes and a voice that trembled when she asked, "Have you ever forgiven them?" I smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, just honestly. "I chose freedom," I said, "not forgiveness." My home now is a small cabin on the edge of a pine forest. Nothing grand, one bedroom, a fireplace, a tiny greenhouse where I grow herbs and tomatoes. I teach online. I hike at dawn. I sleep without locking the doors. No one here knows who I used to be. And I like it that way. There's no tragedy in becoming a stranger. Sometimes anonymity is the most sacred form of peace. My only companion is a silver-furred mutt named Whisper. I found him wandering near the edge of the woods one morning, ribs sharp, eyes cautious. I sat down, palms open, and said, "You're safe." He's never left since. We understand each other, quiet souls who once had to grow sharp edges just to survive. Sometimes I receive emails from former classmates, distant cousins, even journalists. They all want the same thing, confirmation, a quote, a reaction. I never reply. Because their curiosity isn't about me, it's about making sense of a story they never understood. And that's the thing about surviving. You don't owe anyone your healing. Last week I opened an old wooden box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were remnants of a life long gone, a hospital ID badge, a framed drawing from a child who called me real mum, a letter I never sent. And one more thing, a letter I wrote to myself when I was 25. Back then, I thought love was obedience. That silence meant strength. That loyalty was the same as worth. So I wrote to her, "Dear Madeline, you weren't broken. You were silenced. Now you speak without needing a stage. You survived. You rebuilt. You chose yourself. And that, my dear, is the loudest freedom there is." I folded the letter, placed it back in the box, and walked outside. Whisper followed, tail swaying. The sun was setting, casting gold through the trees. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like something was missing, because nothing was. I was whole, not because they said I was, but because I finally believed it myself.